Okay, so today's video is a review of Ormonde Jayne fragrances. I have been gifted 2 sample sets by Ormonde Jayne and I have 23 different fragrances to review. I was gifted these sample sets around 16 months ago. It's taken me ages to try all these fragrances a few times and to write reviews of them. So hopefully I've got my thoughts all in order now and I can just tell you what I think of each one of these. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Ormonde Jayne first and then we'll move into the fragrances. So Ormonde Jayne are a British niche brand. They produced their first fragrance in 2002, but they started out as a candle brand back in 2000. Most of their fragrances are either perfumed by Xi'an, who's of Eccentric Molecules fame, or by Linda Pilkington, who's the brand owner. But there are other perfumers that work with the brand too. The brand has produced 92 fragrances to date. Having tried 23 of the fragrances from Ormonde Jayne now, I would describe the brand as modern classic. And by that I mean they're in quite a traditional style. You're not going to get, a very photorealistic gourmand from this brand, for example. But they are very much a brand with a modern feel to them. So the sample sets have 12 fragrances in each and they look like this. One fragrance is actually between both sample sets. That's why I'm only trying out 23 in this video. But the sample sets cost £65 each. They're not cheap, but I understand why they cost that much because each of these samples is 2ml each. There's 24ml in one of the sample sets. And their pricing on their full bottles is 10ml is £50, 4 times 10ml is £150, and 88ml retails for £235. So I can see that their sample set pricing mirrors how much they're charging for the rest of their range. So the 2 sample sets that I have here are either the Amberesque Spicy Woody sample set or the Atmospheric Fruity Floral sample set. So I'm going to start off with the woody one and then we'll move on to the fruity floral one. So the first fragrance is Taif, and that is described by the brand as rose and soft spices. And this fragrance is the one fragrance that you will find in both sets. So Taif to me is a slightly soapy smelling rose. It's quite shampooey initially, which could be the freesia or perhaps the orange blossom also contributing to that. I don't definitely smell either of those 2 things, but it might be contributing to that kind of almost liquid soap effect that you get in this fragrance. Alongside that feel, there's a really dark feeling rose and a very slight powderiness. This one's not crazily sweet, but there definitely is a slight sweetness to this. And it's quite dry feeling. I don't necessarily sense saffron as in a smell, but I definitely sense it in a dry feeling. I don't think this fragrance is necessarily me. I feel quite indifferent to this one. It's strong and it's long lasting, so that's Taif. So the next fragrance is Tolu, and it's described by the brand as a soft and sensual resinous amberesque fragrance. So when I first sprayed this fragrance, there was a really kind of oily feeling natural floral, really petally, fragrant, but voluptuous. The fragrance then goes into a slightly herbal but rich resinous amber. I did at points smell Lily of the Valley in this fragrance, and I would compare the Lily of the Valley here with the Lily of the Valley in Lauren by Ralph Lauren, if you remember that fragrance from the 90s. It's not fresh and light, it's more of a vintage feeling kind of Lily of the Valley. There's also something here that makes me think of rose stems and even the thorns on rose stems. You really have to like old school style fragrances to enjoy this one. It dries down into a herbal, even slightly piney, musky, animalic feeling amber. It does go in a slightly powdery direction too, and there's a slight feel of some isoe super here. I don't think this one's necessarily for me again, so the closest thing that I could describe this one as would be like a cool and herbal version of Ambre Nuit. So if you take Ambre Nuit and remove the warmth and the spices and replace it with coolness and a herbal feel, then you'd be approaching this fragrance. So that's Tolu. So next up we have Ambre Royale, and this one is described as a spellbinding spicy amber by the brand. So this for me was the standout here. I really enjoyed this one. So this opens with a really gorgeous feeling anise, a sweet anise. There's quickly a quite high-pitched, really heady feeling floral. Noticeably jasmine to begin with, and then followed by rose and some orange blossom. With the citrus at the beginning though, those florals smell very golden, sunny and almost sparkly. The opening is just lovely. As this fragrance dries down, it takes a slightly menthol-like direction. The far dry down makes me think of blackberry and anise sweets, like a boiled sugar sweet. But it has a real smoothness and very enticingly both a warmth and a coolness. The rose is still there, but it just smells purple. Ambroxan is listed here, but it doesn't get in the way of this lovely fragrance. I really think that it's quite well done here. To me, this feels very much like a signature fragrance, something you could wear all year round. So this one is Ambre Royale. Next up is Ormonde Woman, and this one is described as green, woody and empowering. So this one began like you're smelling a forest, but out of the window. It's more subtle than actually being in a forest. It's more like you're near it. It's got a lovely golden and oily feel to begin with. It makes me think of L'Occitane face creams. Golden, yellow, sweet florals like Immortelle and maybe some broom. Things like that, but with a herbal coolness. This does feel like a green fragrance, but I would describe it more as like a Christmas tree kind of green rather than a sappy green. It's not really a fresh green, it's more of a dry green. There's very noticeably some cardamom here as well to begin with. It's nice and cool feeling. There's also some vetiver and even some lemon. It's really smooth. As it dries down, it becomes warmer, woodier, and the coriander pops a little bit. It becomes powdery, the green feeling almost goes, and you're left with a warm, almost smoky, distant feeling pine kind of smell. I think this one is really nicely done. I did prefer the mid to the dry down, but what I love about this fragrance is they've called it Ormonde Woman, and they've not made a pretty, delicate, sweet feeling fragrance. They've made a really inventive and very different fragrance. If you look on the brand website, they talk a lot about this black hemlock ingredient, and I guess that's what's making this fragrance so distinctively different to everything else I've smelt. So that's Ormonde Woman. So next we have Ormonde Man, and that's described as an aromatic, woody Chypre fragrance. So this fragrance is slightly fresher when compared with Ormonde Woman. The cardamom gives this a fresher, cooler feel, and that comes through with the coriander initially. This is not a spicy hot fragrance, this is a spicy cool fragrance. It's quite delicate and woody initially, but really as this dries down it becomes creamier and muskier. Then mossy, a little woody, and then even sparkly with a citrus feel along with the spices. I think out of the two fragrances, Ormonde Man and Ormonde Woman, I much prefer Ormonde Woman. They are noticeably brother and sister. They are fragrances that are noticeably related. They have some overlapping ingredients, some overlapping ideas. But I think I just prefer the woman version more than the man version. But this is a very strong and long-lasting fragrance. That's Ormonde Man. So next is Nawab of Oudh Intensivo. So this one is described as a complex and spicy oud fragrance. So to me, this is a lovely, spicy, fruity, woody fragrance. It opens with quite strong cardamom, more gentle cinnamon, along with a sweet pink rose. This is spicy, creamy and woody. The creamy florals really amp up as this dries down, and I really like the cardamom here. As this dries down, it's the cool, fresh spices that are left alongside a slightly salty feeling ambergris and some musk. I really like this one. There's a lovely, fresh, spicy feel to this, but it's also soft and floral too. So that's Nawab of Oudh Intensivo. The next one is Montabaco Intensivo, which is described by the brand as a masterclass in sensuality. So this is a smoky fireside suede with some powdery violet and some tobacco. It's very atmospheric, and I think of a very sophisticated cowboy. The suede is a little bit animalic and it gets more leathery as it dries down. It also becomes a little bit more Chypre-esque as it dries down. It's slightly green, and there's also that sort of slight hum of isoe super here. Not necessarily for me this one, but nicely done. So that's Montabaco Intensivo. Next up is Vanille des Afriques Intensivo, and the brand described this one as enveloping a pure pedigree. I just don't understand some of these descriptions. They don't really tell you anything about the fragrance, do they? But they're kind of entertaining. So this fragrance, I was really expecting the vanilla to be very front and centre and to be something very recognisable to other vanilla fragrances that I've tried. And this fragrance is just not that. It's an indolic, papery feeling vanilla fragrance. It's quite woody, and I'm guessing the slightly papery feel is coming from a combination of the vetiver and maybe also the orris. There's something slightly animalic to this, and I don't know whether there's a slightly dirty musk here. It's quite an odd mix because that papery woody vanilla feels very clean, but then the florals and the musk don't necessarily maintain that feeling. The dry down makes me think of a sweet, textured, papery vanilla, but in the form of a Tic Tac coating, or maybe one of those push-up lipstick style candy pastel coloured sweets. I think this fragrance is just really surprising because it just isn't what you expect when you first smell it. I think to me this is more of a orris vanilla fragrance than a vanilla orris fragrance. It's definitely got a sweet, chalky texture to it. Long lasting though, much like pretty much all of the rest of this range. So that's Vanille de Afriques Intensivo. Next is Arabesque, and this one is described as an olfactory journey. So this fragrance is a fruity rose oud. This smells incredibly rich and there's a really nice balance between the sweetness, the oud and the patchouli. The blackcurrant really pops in the beginning and saffron's listed. I do notice it a little bit, but there's nothing too off-putting for me with the saffron. If you've watched my reviews before, you will know that I really dislike saffron and I don't dislike it here. This fragrance does turn a little bit soapy as it dries down, but actually it's quite mild. And I think that's probably because of the oak moss. As it dries down, you do also get a drier feeling rose appearing. This fragrance also does turn powdery eventually. I think if you like deep but sweet, fruity rose oud fragrances, then you'll probably enjoy this one. It's fun and fruity, but still well put together and elegant. I do very much prefer the opening to the dry down of this one, but I do just still think it's very nice overall. So that is Arabesque. Next fragrance is Xi'an, and it's described by the brand as calming and hypnotic. So this one opens very fresh, but warm, spicy and woody to begin with. It's also got that slight sparkle, which I'm beginning to think might be a bit of a house signature for Ormonde Jayne, because it seems to be in a lot of their fragrances a slightly sparkly feel. There's something musky here too, and actually the opening weirdly makes me think of the smell when you spray WD-40. That smell does calm down though, and really as this dries down further, it turns into a musky, woody feeling sandalwood. It's got that kind of sharpened pencil smell to it. The spiciness here makes me think of Chinese five spice. I think mostly of anise, but I know there are other things here that I'm perhaps just not picking up on. This fragrance did get smoother as it dried down, but I found it quite sharp to begin with. I think this one is definitely going to be mostly a love or a hate fragrance. I can't see too many people being on the fence about this one. For me, I really struggled for the first hour or so, but the dry down was better. So that one is Xi'an. So the next fragrance is Byzance, and that's described as soft leather meets gourmand notes. So for the first minute, it smelt like a slightly smoky incense with a really bright and fruity lychee. It then very quickly becomes more berry-like and super fruity. The incense-like smokiness here made me think of almost like a slightly burnt fruity sugar. But this also has a dense powdery base and it smells a little bit suede-like close up. This fragrance is also slightly creamy to me and not overly woody. So this one, I think the bit that I really enjoyed was the lychee at the beginning and also the smoky resinous feel as well. But as this dried down, it got very sweet very quickly and the interesting aspects faded back. I think this one just wasn't necessarily for me. So that one is Byzance. So the final one in the first set is called Muscat. And that's described by the brand as rich in spices and sweets. So Muscat is a sweet, resinous, leathery oud fragrance. So I think with the name Muscat, you're thinking Oman, aren't you? And you're thinking probably frankincense. And yes, I get a citrusy, resinous feel to this fragrance. There's something syrupy and sweet in the background with a slightly smoky, leathery oud. As this dries down, it becomes slightly green, slightly mossy, and there's something else going on that I'm not sure about. It's warm, it's enveloping, and it's probably the nicest example that I've smelt of this type of fragrance. It's very polite, it's very put together, but I would say this one is very loud. This is something that you really have to be careful with how much you spray. So not necessarily for me this one, but I do think it's nice overall. So that's Muscat. So we're on to the Atmospheric Fruity Floral set now, and the first fragrance in this set is called Osmanthus. And the brand described this as a summery citrus floral fragrance. So this opens with a really lovely, fresh feeling grapefruit pomelo. It's sweet but fresh and a little aquatic. As the fruitiness fades back, it becomes more of an aquatic, fresh and sweet floral. I wouldn't have known what it was, but the brand lists water lily in this fragrance. And I definitely think that is more the star than the Osmanthus here. For me, the Osmanthus just provides a kind of supporting texture to the fragrance rather than being the main player. So overall, I'd say this is an aquatic, sweet floral fragrance with a slight fruitiness still in the dry down and a mild, slightly bitter but still fresh green bite in the background. It's actually a little bit shampoo-like in the dry down. I would say a high-end shampoo. So Osmanthus I had tried before, and I remember the first time I tried it, I really actively disliked it because I felt like it was very, very aquatic feeling. But this time I tried it and it was kind of more powdery feeling to me, which I guess maybe more of the Osmanthus came through than before. I think this one is a mild like now, so that's Osmanthus. So next up is Frangipani. The brand described Frangipani as soft and captivating. So this opens with sweet, watery florals and citrus to begin with, accompanied by a creamy Frangipani. It's dense and tropical and smells fruity as well as floral. I'd actually believe there would be mango here or some other soft orange coloured fruit. A pink rose does come through slightly in the background, but overall it's a sweet, solar feeling, bright, fruity floral fragrance. It does get muskier as it dries down, and actually the musk here is not super smooth, it's slightly grainy. I think there might be some ambroxan here, nothing too crazy. This fragrance really overall reminds me a little bit of Jasmine des Anges by Dior. I think I'd describe this as a heavier, more tropical feeling version of Jasmine des Anges. It's odd because I don't think jasmine is meant to be the star here, but it does really come through in the dry down of this fragrance. I normally absolutely love this type of fragrance, but I'm just not sure about this one because of the musk at the end. So that one is Frangipani. Next up is Champaca, and this is described by the brand as an abstract gourmand floral. So Champaca is a fragrance note that I never really know how to describe. I just think it's such an odd type of smell, and it's so distinctive. Once you smelt it in one fragrance and you know how it smells, you will notice Champaca in other fragrances. Champaca to me is a little bit watery, it's slightly green, it's sometimes a little bit dirty smelling. I'm not normally a huge fan of Champaca, especially when it's done super realistically, like in April Aromatics fragrances, but here I don't mind it. In this fragrance there's lots of tea, but the Champaca is watery and green feeling and not necessarily dirty. It feels quite zen and calming, this one, and really in the dry down there's a smooth feeling musk with a slightly watery edge to it. This one has much more tea than Champaca. So overall I think this fragrance, if I were to compare it to another fragrance, would smell like Lancome's Miracle. But if you imagine Miracle but less pink feeling, I think that's probably the closest thing I can compare this one to. I think for me the tea here is much more prominent than the Champaca, and I appreciate that. So that's Champaca. So next up in this set would be normally Taif, but that's included in the Woody set. So if you want to see the review of that one, then you need to go back to the Woody set. So next up is Isfarkand, and this is described as a peppery cedarwood cologne. So this to me opens as a spicy, sparkly, dry feeling citrus. So it's mainly lime and vetiver to begin with. Later this is warm and woody and very slightly bitter with some moss, but the dry, spicy feel to this stays. This one just wasn't for me. It didn't excite me. I think the brand owner said that she formulated this one for her husband, and I think that makes sense as to perhaps why this one doesn't feel like me. I'm guessing I'm not the target audience, so that's Isfarkand. The next fragrance is called Evernia. It's described as distinctive oak moss with a modern aspect. So this one I found really interesting. Whilst it's not necessarily something that I would wear or that I would choose for me, I did really enjoy smelling this one. This fragrance is essentially based around oak moss, but it has both warm and cool feeling spices, notably pepper and cardamom in the opening. And I got some violet early on, but later on it's more citrusy, quite orangey. Again, this one is quite dry feeling and it turns a little bit more powdery as it dries down. This fragrance weirdly gave me the image of a medieval night. That's really what I imagined when I smelt this one. I imagined this fragrance being worn by a knight in armour. I like this one. I think it's quite an understated fragrance. It's casual, but it's smart. But I still think this fragrance would be equally wearable at a pub or a function. It's one of those signature fragrances. So this one is Evernia. So the next fragrance is Intensivo, and it's described as citrus and floral anchored with tea notes. So this fragrance smells really 90s, early 2000s to me. It's got that definite shampoo-y floral vibe about it. So shampooey white florals, a bitter green tea and a mild spicy woody feeling. The florals here really fade back quite quickly and you're left with that bitter green tea and the spicy woodiness. I really struggled with this one in the mid, but the dry down seemed to improve. I think I was initially expecting a spicy, sparkly tea and this just felt a bit flat on me. It initially goes in an earthy direction, but then it goes sweeter and more powdery floral as it dries down. I think this one is not necessarily me, but it is very distinctively Ormonde Jayne from the other fragrances I've smelt. Throughout these sets, it's very noticeable that a lot of these fragrances have a slightly soapy feeling oak moss in them, and this one also has that. So this one is Xi'an Intensivo. So the next fragrance is Verano, and it's described by the brand as a grapefruit entrance on a tobacco leaf flower. So this one is a fresh but green, smoky feeling citrus chypre fragrance to begin with. There's a subtle feeling juniper alongside a sour feeling citrus and a kind of iso-y super feeling woody smokiness alongside that chypre feel. It smells like a very classic feeling chypre, something with a very smoky, leathery and woody aspect to it. I used to own Bandit by Robert Piguet and I wouldn't say it's anywhere near as extreme as that fragrance, but it does make me think of Bandit. It's got more of a citrusy freshness to it though. I don't really have too much to say about this one. I think you just have to really like those kind of leathery chypre fragrances. So that one is Verano. Next is Sakura. So Sakura is described by the brand as paying homage to the cherry blossom season. So Sakura is really dense and pink and floral to begin with. There's definitely some cherry blossom here. But very quickly, there's also a watery aspect to this, which may be the water lily or perhaps the cyclamen. All of that fades pretty quickly though, and you're left with a dry feeling spiciness, most prominently the coriander. It makes the whole thing feel dry. It's sweet but earthy in a dusty kind of way. It's a little bit nose tingly, which I guess might be the pink pepper, and it's also slightly woody. In the far dry down, the florals really return and you get a kind of spiced pink, watery floral feel, which could be the cyclamen or the water lily again. I think with this one, if you absolutely love cherry blossom and if you like really pink feeling fragrances, this is not going to be a fragrance for you. I don't think this is really an easy reach kind of fragrance. It's not a friendly fragrance to me. I don't wish to be insulting, but to me this smells slightly like when fragrances start to go off slightly and they sort of have this kind of almost celery seed kind of smell to them. I get that kind of smell in this fragrance, which I guess is the coriander, but I think the dustiness just really adds to that. So that one is Sakura. So the next fragrance is Levant, and this one is described by the brand as happiness in a bottle. So Levant, I think, is one of their best sellers, and this is the second time that I've tried Levant in a video. And I tried to just clear my mind of my previous experience because it was a couple of years ago and I just wanted to see what my reaction was like now to Levant. When I retried it, I instantly realised why I didn't particularly enjoy it the first time I tried it. The ambroxan here is really punchy in the opening spray. If you can't smell ambroxan, it's not going to be something that bothers you, but if you can smell it, it's very front and centre. It does calm down though, and it does improve as it dries down. Overall, Levant is a sparkly, citrusy, clean feeling floral fragrance. I think when I first tried Levant, I had in my head that this was going to smell like a very photorealistic floral fragrance. And I think if you've tried a few Ormonde Jayne fragrances, that's not what you're ever going to get from an Ormonde Jayne fragrance. You're always going to get something that smells like a perfume, not a bunch of flowers. This is really a soft orange citrus ambroxan fragrance in the opening. But then even a minute or two in, it becomes more about the florals. It's more about the peony here. It's even got a slightly aquatic feeling. It's almost marine. 30 minutes in and the ambroxan pretty much dies down. It's a much more pleasant experience for me. I said something in my previous review that I think a lot of people found insulting, but I honestly didn't mean it to be an insulting way to put it. To me, it still does remind me of a really posh hotel toilet. You know when you walk into a really expensive hotel and you walk into the toilets, it doesn't smell like a toilet. It smells really fresh and really floral. And that's how a Levant makes me think. It makes me think of a really posh hotel. It's clean, it's floral, it's watery, it's a little soapy, it's musky, citrusy, fresh. But yeah, overall the dry down is a slightly marine feeling musk. For me, Levant is never going to be a love because of the ambroxan at the beginning. But I think if you do like fragrances like Ex Nihilo's Fleur Narcotique, or if you like Parfums de Marly's Valea, then this is in a similar realm. And I think you might really enjoy this one. And I'm going to just take my judgment out of this because I know Levant is incredibly popular, but it's just not something I personally get along with. So that's Levant. So next is Damask. So Damask is described as a gourmand simmering rose. So Damask opens for me with a really fruity feeling rose. It's like a fruitier Turkish delight kind of smell, but less sweet than Turkish delight. As it dries down, it gets darker, it gets fruitier, and you notice the blackcurrant. It does have that slight green aspect of blackcurrant. You definitely notice a bit of a tartness to this. This is really one of those beery style roses, a slightly fermented rose. If you think of the original formulation of C by Giorgio Armani, that also has that kind of slightly beery feeling rose in it. And I think that's really what I smell with Damask. This is more tart though. It's not as syrupy as C is. I think this might also slightly make me think of Delina, but no, they're not dupes. They're not that similar. They just both have a tartness and a fruitiness with rose. I think if you do like tart, fruity rose fragrances, this one might be one to check out. I actually really like this one, but I did find it to be quite linear. It didn't really change throughout the wear. So that one is Damask. So the final fragrance is called Babylonia, and it's described by the brand as enchantingly soft and powdery. So when I first sprayed this, I felt immediately like I'd smelt this before, and I can't think of which fragrance I'm thinking of, but I definitely got a recognition of another fragrance in it. So this opens with violet and orris. It's purple, powdery, floral and sweet. Then as this dries down, the blackcurrant becomes more prominent, it becomes sweeter, it becomes even more powdery and more vanillic. I imagine the benzoin here is really adding to that powdery vanillic sweetness. But it's joined by a herbal powdery dryness and a sour citrus too. This one in the dry down is quite herbal, dry, green, but also powdery and slightly sweet from the blackcurrant. In the final dry down, it goes more into the baby powder kind of realm of muskiness. This one again was not a love and not a dislike. It was just sort of in the middle really. So that one is Babylonia. So what do I think, having tried 23 of these fragrances? I think there were some that were more for me than others, and there were several here that I wouldn't ever consider buying. But I think the one here that really stood out to me as the fragrance that I really, really enjoyed, the one that was far and away my favourite, was Ambre Royale. I think that's the only one that I would consider purchasing from here. But I did really also enjoy Nawab of Oudh, Damask, and also OJ Woman. So please do let me know if you tried anything from Ormonde Jayne and which one is your particular favourite. I imagine that Levant is going to do very well in the comments here. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this video has been useful, and also if you haven't already done so, then please do press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!